Today I'm sharing one of the most profound healing techniques that I know of. Hello and welcome. This is the Aya Om podcast, and today I'm talking about the conscious connected breathwork technique. I'm going to break down the technique into a number of principles to share with you some of the teachings of the breath. The teachings and the language of the breath is not exclusive to this technique. So let's break down these principles because I want to share with you how working with your breath can have a profound impact on the course of your life, because this technique has changed my life. It's changed many of the people's lives that I've worked with, and it has changed many, many more around the world. Now, this technique has three main principles as I see it, and then a number of supportive principles, and I'll share with you those today. The first three principles I'll go over and then learn from it. There's more teachings than I can possibly explain in this podcast, but let's dive right in. First, the breath is connected without pause. Continuous circular breathing, that is. Second, the inhaling breath is yang. It's effortful and full. Third, the exhaling breath is yin, relaxed, surrendered, easeful. Breakdown. Number 1, the breath is connected without pause. Circular breathing, meaning inhale meets exhale, and ordinarily there's a little stoppage in the breath between inhale and exhaling breath. Further, stoppages in the breath can happen unconsciously due to stress, due to trauma, due to excessive thinking, due to many conditions. And this stoppage of the breath is okay in some circumstances. But when the stoppage of the breath becomes built into the subconscious pattern in a deleterious way due to stress built up in the system, there'll be many more teachings on that, but stress built up in the system, we lose our communication with the present moment. So when an individual commits to connecting their breath for a period, usually in a conscious connected breathwork session that's an hour, they're committing to the present moment. Stoppages of the breath indicate the nervous system is unable to keep up with the reality as it is, and the stress causes this stoppage, this blockage of energy, this momentary lapse of processing. So it's not caught up to the present moment awareness. When we breathe continuously in the present moment, there's no opportunity to be somewhere else. If we're truly devoted, we're disciplined, we're paying utmost attention to the breath in the present moment, we are here and now. And this is the only place where miracles occur. This is the only place where anything occurs. Everything else is just a fabrication of mind, past and present, yeah? So the connected breath is key to present moment awareness. Now, the connection of the breath has much more. Because when you circulate the breath where inhale meets exhale, it builds up a charge like connecting a circuit, and an energy is cultivated. Inhaling breath activates the du or the yang meridian, and exhaling breath runs the ren or the conception vessel. There's a certain energy exchange that produces a strengthening of the bioelectricity in the body, like a magnet and a coil producing electricity. When the inhale meets the exhale, more prana is brought into the system to circulate, to nourish the body, to rebalance the body, to heighten the consciousness, to raise the vibrational frequency. As this happens, this is responsible for many of the self-healing properties, increasing the amount of energy in the system, and pure energy. Because we're always taking in some chi, some prana from the breath. We're always taking in food for the average person, eating and drinking every day. But the food that we take in has a certain DNA. It's got a certain information and intelligence to it that comes from the animal or plant. But the breath is a much more pure and clean source of energy. and it can be utilized in different ways. It has its own intelligence. We could call this the spirit of the breath, breathing the great spirit, breathing in the soul. There's a metaphysical component to all of this, and a deeper energetic understanding that systems like traditional Chinese medicine and the yogic sciences have explored and articulated in various ways. And Western science is not the language at this point for discussing these matters at a very deep level, as our science is not yet deepened in these more what is termed esoteric at this point, which will one day be scientific at a later stage in our civilization's development. So the connected rhythm has a profound effect on the energy of the body, but also, as mentioned with the Du and the Ren meridian, there are certain circulations of energy that run through the subtle channels. The Du and the Ren being the primary pathways of yin and yang energy that helps to move energy through the 12 primary meridians, the organ meridians that many people are familiar with from traditional Chinese medicine. So not only is there an increased amount of energy being brought through, which has a purifying and activating, tonifying, enhancing effect, but there's also a regulatory effect by circulating the energies in a balanced way. It's not simply about bringing in more energy, it's about bringing in more energy and balancing and regulating the energy of the system. So when an individual, once again, comes to this practice and commits to this 1 hour of continuous breathing, they have an opportunity to get to know themselves in a good way. My understanding is we have a natural contentment and capacity to self-regulate and turn within and know joy that is not externally, is not attached to any external stimuli or pleasure or seeking outside of the self. So this is the more metaphysical and deeper teachings of the breath beyond the mechanical breathing. This is where we want to get people to, in some sense, with this technique, is back to that natural contentment. So this practice is an opportunity to practice it for an hour. It's not a month in a cave. It's an hour, and it's a powerful way to reestablish center, like true center in Satchitananda, the inner bliss that is our being. And the opportunity as well is to see what's in the way, to see the program patterns in the mind. And because when an individual comes to this practice, breathing for the hour, for some individuals, and it varies from session to session, even with advanced breathers, is that they may have trouble staying present, as many individuals do have trouble staying present when they're distracting or avoiding themselves from feeling something deeper. Feeling something deeper in terms of there's unprocessed negative emotion and things that they're not willing to see within themselves. So instead of turning within, this individual, if they're in an avoidance or control pattern, they will do just that. They will avoid what's inside of them and control their lives in various ways. And you could be a very highly functional individual in a, say, successful career and have an adventurous life of doing all kinds of things, biking and climbing, but you could be still living out of an avoidance pattern to not process and deal with perhaps trauma from when you were younger, or undealt with loneliness or anxiety. And there's any number of control patterns an individual will have externally and internally, so within the body, that prevent the body from doing what the body does, which is a natural self-healing process. It's just like when you get a cut, your body has a natural self-healing process to heal that. And in so much as you can, if you don't poke at it and get it dirty and mess with that process, it heals readily and most effectively. So too with the mind and the emotions. If you sit in meditation or if you sit in breathwork, the body is going to work on that. It's going to bring up, and the bringing up is like the pus coming to the surface of a wound to help to heal it. And the breathwork practice is this great teacher, this opportunity to see what's in the way of your natural contentment, yeah? So that's one of the foundational pieces to understand with this technique that forms the ground. And there are many conscious connected breathwork techniques. They may not all share this deep aim, but this is the way that I've learned it and I teach it. What I want to say here on that is that some techniques are more doing or cathartic, and they perhaps I'll explain a particular technique that is more like a fire breathing technique. It's more effortful on the inhale and the exhale. This is going to produce profound changes in the physiology, and many of the same effects of bringing in more energy will have self-healing effects. But if the practice is all about effort, the intention of coming to the natural breath and allowing things to be as they are, that teaching isn't going to come through in that particular technique. Now, this is not in any way to put down those techniques. I employ those. I see breath like medicine. It's prescriptive, and you want to use the right techniques for the right amount of time and for the right individual, etc., etc. But this particular technique, and this is why I love it so much, is this profound teaching of surrender. And I'll share much more about that as we go into the other principles here. But just sprinkling this in here, this is one of the most profound teachings, and this comes from my understanding of meditation systems. So not just breath work, meditation systems. And when you meditate, you don't change the breathing process of volition, of will. You actually allow the breath. So you're just witnessing the breath, because you don't want to be in that position of doership. You don't want to be doing a technique. In meditation proper, as differentiated from meditation techniques, relaxation techniques, concentration techniques, meditation proper, and I have made a full episode on this, meditation proper is a state, and it's a state that is, you could say, achieved, you could say it's realized, but it's not realized of any particular technique. It's a very subtle and intricate thing to understand until you understand it. Meditation is the end result of a process that you may have volition to bring yourself to, but the actual shift from your effort to meditation does not happen of you. It is like grace. Yeah? Does that make sense? I hope so. So what I'm trying to get at here is that there's a way to work with meditation and meditation techniques of witnessing, and the result of them is something much deeper and more profound, in my opinion, than any effortful doership pranayama technique, because the shift that happens from that full surrender into meditation, the state of meditation, has a more profound effect on the being. The being that permanently transforms them in a more profound way. For example, like if you do breath of fire technique, you may have a physiological change that could last for 15, 20 minutes or an hour. Maybe the whole day you're feeling a little different, like a good workout can ripple out through the whole day. But reaching a profound state of meditation can move an individual's consciousness to a layer so deep within them that it sets a new ground of their being. So there's no other way I can explain this without using a kind of spiritual metaphorical language, yeah? The ground of your being, like your consciousness, roots at a deeper level within your mind, body, even beyond mind and body, to the soul, to something deeper. So this is one of the most profound ways that healing can take place, because once we make contact with that deepest part of us, our inner divinity, there is a profound level of healing that is possible. Even if ailments of any kind aren't healed in that moment, uh, deep experience of something beyond mind and body leaves an individual with a kind of tranquility that even if that disease, that ailment were to kill them, they already have a rooting at something deeper than themselves. And the healing that comes from this, healing coming from the same root word as whole, as holy, they're very much connected. It's like finding the missing piece of you, which it's like those diagrams of the iceberg and the conscious mind being just a little piece in the subconscious, and we could even say the soul being a vast iceberg below. There's so much larger than anything that we know as mind and body, especially in just the conscious frame. Yeah. So anyways, I don't want to go too deep into this spiritual tangent with going off these principles, but there is a capacity to reach these profound states of depth within you by surrendering that I haven't personally experienced the same level with any kind of control technique, unless I use the control technique for a bit and then I move into meditation. So there's different formulas as to how to work with these. But anyways, establishing a relationship with this deepest, most natural breath is something we'll talk about in the later additional cues. So for now, let's just bring back the first principle and then move to the second one, and that's the connected breath. The connected breath, which is so key to circulating the life force energy through the body in a developed and balanced way to bring that individual to the present moment where healing can occur. Then the second principle is the quality of the inhale. The quality of the inhale being yang. The quality of the inhale being enlivened, being effortful. I'm using a number of terms here to give you some descriptors as to how you may step into this principle. And there's so much subtlety to this. You can't possibly explain a technique like this in just a few words and principles, but this is an attempt, yeah? The inhale being active is about opening your body to say yes. Now, this technique is primarily done through the mouth, as I teach it and as many individuals teach it, though it can be done through the nose. A little note on that, we could talk a lot about that, but a little note on that is that mouth is a more effective hole in the body. It's a more effective hole in the body for releasing energy. Now, if you want to regulate and if you want to breathe throughout your day, for sure, breathe through the nose. That's the optimal way of bringing breath through. It warms it. It's a humidifier. It's got nitric oxide. It helps to do many things for the body to support it so that the breath is best utilized. But if you want to run as hard as you can, maximum exertion, breathing in and out through the mouth is going to be more effective. If you want to express yourself and sing, you ain't singing through your nose, my friends. If you want to express yourself and make love, you ain't doing that through the nose either. Through the mouth, you're moaning, yeah? So when you want to express and release and do things in this way, the mouth is a little bit more effective. There's also a relationship between the releasing of the jaw and the tensions that many people hold. Perhaps a future episode I'll do is on all the different patterns of tension in the body and how this relates to the more metaphysical or aspects of how our mind, body, and emotions integrate into the system. And it's a very fascinating field that I'm so passionate about learning within myself and finding within others to help support them in their process. But anyways, the jaw, very much related to the pelvis. So when we release the jaw, it helps to release the pelvis, which allows us to breathe deeper into the pelvis, into the lower abdomen, and allows for relaxation of the jaw, which, as mentioned, is a very common place for holding patterns related to clenching, grinding, related to shoulder and neck, related to not speaking your truth and preventing expression, these kinds of things. So this inhaling breath with effort, what I can say here, and where there's a lot of subtlety, is it's saying yes to life. But at any given time during the practice, that doesn't mean it's like we're revving it up to 100. We're not revving it up to 100% the whole time. What we look to do is breathe and open the body to receive. It could be like 60 to 90%, depending on where you're at in your session. Fuller than a regular breath that is not touched. Not like the meditation breath I'm talking about. Perhaps at the end of a session we can go to that. But more so in the beginning of the session, it's a deeper, fuller breath, and we're looking to expand. So, why? Because stress and pressure and let me say it like this. Stress builds pressure is what I meant to say there. What does that mean? It means that when we have a belief system that is limited or negative, it's going to attract or create a negative emotion within us. The negative emotion, if you think about anger, contraction of the fists and jaw. If you think about sadness, there's like this curling into the center, protecting the chest. They contract the body. They pull it towards its center like a safety mechanism, like protecting yourself from a fight. It's like you're hiding your inwards, you're bowing your head, rather than expansive states like a smile literally upturns the corners of the lips and lift your energy up into openness and expansion. A laugh roars out of you. It jiggles loose tensions in your diaphragms and expands you in all directions. Yeah. So negative emotions and limiting beliefs and stress as a general term for all kinds of stress, not just mental, emotional. We can experience lost myself there. Very electromagnetic stress. There we go. And these things can, once again, cause contraction in the body, holding patterns in the body, tensions in the body, as through the negative emotions. So as we experience a lot of stress, maybe we have a big move and a possibility of losing our job, we'll have a number of belief systems about what may happen to us, and these can create anxiety and fear, and these fear patterns and beliefs are going to create the contraction in the body. So when an individual begins to inhale and expand, the breath's coming in and then opening their internal body from the inside out, they'll be expanding into that contraction. And this may create resistance, because as you breathe in, the breath is this vehicle for consciousness. The breath moves from the conscious mind to the subconscious. The breath moves inside of you so you can feel yourself more deeply from inside out, and you have an opportunity to feel the stress and tension. And in order to feel it, in order to heal it, you got to feel it. In order to release that tension from being held in the system, we got to bring energy through it, and we got to move our consciousness through those layers of stress. So you can't hide. You can't hide from the trauma. You can't hide from the past. So we have this opportunity to know ourselves with radical honesty and authenticity. So this is where a lot of the therapeutic action of this technique takes place, is our willingness to open ourselves with an equanimous mind, like a willingness to not control our internal environment so much that we're just seeking pleasure, which relates to those control patterns I talked about earlier, those avoidance patterns of many people have so much internal negative emotion and stress that they're avoiding, undealt with belief systems and parts of themselves that they're not willing to fully see. So they run away from their inside. You just can't hide from it, but you can spend a life stimulating yourself through your five senses externally, so it brings a kind of numbness. Often these individuals will have so many control patterns, TV and food, one thing to the next, that's enough of a numb that the negative emotion within them doesn't surface in a visceral, palpable way. So that it's not so much, forcing them to deal with it until it forces them to deal with it. So this technique takes a certain kind of boldness, and it does take a certain quality of willingness. There's many individuals that I've done breathwork with. They come from many sessions and they're not willing to feel what's there. So they breathe and they may get something out of the technique, but I can see that they're not actually willing to surrender. So they have various different control mechanisms that are quite obvious to a breathwork facilitator, but they're not willing to actually process what's coming up. And obviously, in some sense, they know that it's good for them, but they may not feel safe. They may not feel safe in that session. They may not be ready to deal with those things. There's many other factors, which I'm not going to get into at this moment. So going back to the inhale is yang, and there's this opening and expansion, and it begins in the belly, this breath. The breath naturally begins in the belly. And what I mean by that is you don't breathe into your belly because you don't have lungs there. But your diaphragm, your main thoracic diaphragm, has a capacity to contract and move down with the inhale. So it moves down like towards your pelvis. And this creates more space for the lungs to expand, to bring in more breath. Now, as the diaphragm moves down, this action expands the belly. This is what we mean when we say breathing into the belly. So when this happens well and the body is relaxed, the breath will begin in the lowest part of the pelvis and fill like a glass from the bottom to the top. At a certain point of fullness, you could say, the breath will expand into the chest, and this will help to utilize the fullness of the lungs from bottom to top, utilizing the thoracic diaphragm. And there's also the pelvic and urogenital diaphragm in the lowest part of the body, and the throat diaphragm, and even the upper palate's a diaphragm. Diaphragm being a term here for, it's like a gateway between different cavities of the body, and the diaphragm helps to change the pressure. This is the whole mechanism of lungs, yeah? So your lungs happen to breathe. They breathe naturally. You don't have to do anything. And this is due to the pressure of the lungs versus the pressure of the external atmosphere. And since birth, since you took that first breath, there was this beautiful, this is like the most beautiful love story that there is. There's this beautiful relationship between inhaling and exhaling from the pressure and expansion of your lungs in the universe. And this is the whole mechanism right there. It's pressure and gas exchange. And now what we can do as an individual is we can either contract and we can not open our body to receive that breath, that life force, or we can repattern our system from those old stress patterns, from the trauma and negative emotion that caused us in the path to contract. And we can practice opening to receive more breath. And yes, we can expand lung capacity. Lungs are elastic. They can continue to expand and expand and expand. So inhaling breath moves from the belly to the heart. Now, as I mentioned, you don't need to breathe full and deep throughout the whole session, but it's really potent to do it for a period. Just like high intensity interval training, there's a focus to expand and then to relax, expand and then to relax. And so you can move through various different states of consciousness as you do this, because you're shifting the biochemistry as you move an increased amount of prana through the system. This movement of the breath, causing massaging of the glandular system, produces all kinds of different hormones to be released, which will change the consciousness in subtle and profound ways, leading to regulation, leading to ecstasy, leading to all kinds of experiences. Not just the hormones changing, but the activation of old memory and patterns, as mentioned with the old stress that may be held in the system. But there's so much more that can be accessed as we work with the consciousness and the intelligence of the breath to move deeply into the subconscious. You could say the reservoir of the past, likes and dislikes, program patterns, thought forms, belief systems. You have an increased access to your internal environment as you do this technique. It's so beautiful. So you move from this inhaling act of saying yes to life and opening into the third principle, which is the yin breath. Perhaps one of the more profound aspects of this teaching, of this technique, is the teaching of the yin breath and ease and surrender. This is perhaps more profound in the West, which is where I've offered this technique, though I have done it in other places, not with the locals. Being a more yang culture, in what I mean by that is traditionally there was the East and the West, yeah? And the West, more external. We were the individuals who sailed across the ocean, and we were doers. We got stuff done. We built technology and did all of these things. And the East, traditionally more internal, have a much deeper and profound relationship with meditation and going within. Nowadays, there's more of a culture of East meets West, which is a beautiful harmonization. But still, West more into doing, more into yang, masculine, effort, achieving. Less is our capacity and our priority to be yin, to relax, to be at ease, yeah? So many people in the West, particularly those in their achievement and masculine energy, do struggle with the capacity to let go. And many individuals who think they're letting go or feel they're relaxed have a lot more to go, because I don't know if there's an end. We can always expand more. We can always ease and surrender more, yeah? So at least I haven't found no end. If you find one, let me know and I'll join you there. We can meet there and have a dance. So the letting go on the exhale is one of the points of practice to really understand if you want to go deep in this technique, because so many breath techniques involve control on the exhale, such as various different pranayama techniques, ujjayi breathing. Prolonging the exhale is profound. It's beautiful. It's very good for the system, can create more resiliency to carbon dioxide, which can help promote various different things such as athletic endurance. There's so many benefits to that. But for this particular technique, and this is what we really must understand if we want to know the breath and the language of the breath really well, is how to work with the breath. As I mentioned, there's a language of the breath, and breath is medicine. So the better that we can understand what's happening as we breathe, the more intelligent we can be with choosing our breathing patterns and shifting our state intelligently. Because just like any medication, if you do the wrong amount, you can have a profoundly deleterious effect on your system. Anyways, getting back to the yin quality, as soon as inhale meets exhale, remember there's no pause, we want to let the breath go with ease and grace, with no holding. It's like you are a channel, you are a flute, you are an instrument for the Great Spirit to play. You invite in life force energy, This is what it is given, what is given. And then you offer it back. And in as best as you can in this technique, you offer it back without holding on to any of it. So this is where we can talk about the throat pattern, many other control patterns of stress in the system. That's all the individual holding on. Instead of being like, I'm just going to fully surrender and trust. No, that's not happening in that system. They're like, no, I'm holding on because I'm not willing to let this belief system go and these negative emotions. And that's the work. That's a lot of the work, is to let go, learning to let go, remembering to let go. For example, if we just talk about what's happening in the nervous system in terms of clenched jaw, what happens is there's sympathetic tone, different aspects of the nervous system. We'll go too deep into that. Hopefully I'm not just breezing over things people don't understand, but sympathetic tone, there's activation in the system. There's a signal that goes from the brain through the spinal cord, through the nerves into the jaw that says contract. This may be due to frustration. This may be due to various things. Maybe you're talking too much and the system is just overworked. At some point, what can happen is there's so much sympathetic signal saying contract, contract, contract. The body just like, okay, I'm just going to automate that signal and just press a button so we're just contracting. And that's what happens. An individual, in some sense, can't relax. They've forgotten how to relax. So the tissues, maybe this is innervating the muscles, the whole musculoskeletal system in the jaw and throat region stays tense. And then the body may try to therapeutically tension release at night, known as clenching or grinding, depending on the pattern. And this is the body's attempt to try to release these patterns, but there's so much sympathetic tone built up in the system that it's usually ineffective, especially if the underlying cause, root cause, which, by the way, most dentists don't get in. They just put a night guard on you and say it's better, but that doesn't actually stop clenching, grinding. I know from a lot of personal experience working in the dental world. There's deeper issues to be dealt with that are in the tissues and in the issues. In the issues meaning that there's deeper process around that program in the system, the beliefs, the emotions, and the actual reasons why that's being integrated into the you can say the recruitment patterns of the musculature. So what the breath does, as we breathe nice, full, and deep with the intention of relaxation on the exhale and practicing this with every exhale for an hour, we can retrain, we can repattern the body to remember to relax, and those deeper patterns of tension that are held in the system can release. Not just the pattern of tension in the musculature, moving beyond that now, is the mental emotional holding. This could be a gripping, this could be someone you wanted to yell at but didn't, and you're holding it in. That is an opportunity, once again, if an individual is willing to feel, to go into that so that they can receive healing, come back to wholeness, and then that whole issue of clenching, grinding can be solved without needing all this extensive work to be done of mouth guards and whatnot. And now I'm not saying I'm against mouth guards in any way, but they don't often solve the actual clenching, grinding problem, but treat the symptom and protect the teeth, which is great if you are clenching, grinding and you don't have opportunities to do this deep work, yeah? So maybe another episode there on clenching, grinding, because that's a very key topic that is found in a lot of the population. I've seen a lot of it in my life. So a few more pieces on yin, perhaps. So when we let go, this is not something subtle, right? Remember, this is not just mechanical breathing. To actually surrender at the deepest level is to surrender at the deepest level. Surrender is a great quality, because if you surrender to orgasm, if you surrender to death, it's the same quality of surrender. It just depends on the polarity, yeah? So when you truly surrender, your whole system, it's incredible. It can become like jelly. It can, there's so much complexity in the system. There's so much complexity in the system, and we don't realize how much habitual tension we hold in the system. And this habitual tension is energy, it's contraction that always has to be sustained. It's using so much energy. And until you release it and you're free from that energy, a lightness develops and this openness and expansiveness. You're like, oh my God, I was carrying that for how long? So when we learn to relax and we practice relaxation, we can peel back these layers. I said I was going to share a few points, but I'm going to jump into the additional principles because what I was going to share will be covered in the next few principles. But just a quick review here. Seems like a super simple technique, yeah? Keep your breath connected, breathe deep on the inhale, and then exhale, relax it out. All good, all gravy, yeah? I mean, the practice is incredibly complex sometimes. Sometimes you're just lying there. Sometimes your body is moving and shaking, and there's all these other things, which I probably won't even talk to in this episode because this technique is so vast. For so simple, it's so vast. Anyways, so the additional principles I'm going to share today is that natural breathing is best. Optimized breathing is best. Body is relaxed. And there are certain qualities of mind that help to support this practice. Now, for time's sake, I'm going to just merge all of these principles as one and just talk about it as one big spiel. Okie dokie. So how this is going to go is we'll start with the natural breathing is best. Now, I talked a little bit about natural contentment in the beginning. Natural contentment being a place within you where you're just happy to be. Now, any mental emotional state is represented in your breathing pattern. You have a breath print for each moment of every unique thing that you're feeling. If you're feeling angry, your breath looks a certain way. If you're feeling sad, your breath looks a certain way, yeah? If you're content, the rhythm of your breath looks a certain way. The best way I can describe that is it's just natural. It's natural, meaning there's no control or regulation. You'll find this if you're really stressed and you lie down and you just witness your breath, you won't be able to just let it go. Now, just because you're in that stress state, you may have forgotten what it feels like to relax it, so you may not know what it is like to relax, and you may be thinking you're relaxed. But if you're really stressed, you'll know that it doesn't feel good, because when you're really stressed and you're just watching the breath, you're stressed. Stress doesn't cause you to relax into your center. It generally causes you to want to avoid or control or grip, or just brings a general malaise and discomfort. So natural breath is something that many people haven't experienced, in my opinion, depending on the population we're looking at, but many people haven't experienced perhaps since they were young or outside of limited periods, say after an intense exercise or after a very big weekend. Because once again, this is just my opinion, I could be completely wrong. Many individuals have lost connection with that natural contentment just based on the way that we live in our culture and how we've been raised. That's my experience. I don't think I touched upon natural contentment till the last few years of my life, through lots of meditation and practice and surrender and learning to let go. And still it's a navigation to maintain my center and to let go of old control patterns. That's just where I'm at. That's what I'm projecting onto others in the way that I've seen their breathing patterns and tune into their frequency. Could be completely wrong. Maybe I need to revise that, but just going off that doesn't need to be true for these next points to be valid and important. There is a natural way of breathing where we can just allow the breath to be relaxed. And because this isn't meditation, as mentioned, true meditation, just not touching the breath. This is not meditation technique. So what we do is we work with the natural breath and then we just nudge it. So we're not just taking complete control of the breath. This is the doer. This is the ego. that if it's active in the regular life and we move it into the practice, it's going to still be active. We want to, in some sense, surrender that control from the ego to allow for a greater intelligence of the body, of the soul, you could say, to move through us and to guide the session. And in my opinion, unless you live completely from that place always, there's a transition. It's like dancing. For many people to learn to freely move their body, it doesn't just happen like that unless you're well trained in it and you do it a lot. There's a certain transition of dropping out of the mind and integrating the mind into the body, and then allowing the body and the intelligence from the soul to move through the body and to move you. So what this means in terms of the breath is there's an establishment in the beginning of the practice of natural breathing, just allowing the breath. And then, just as I mentioned with the pressure system, your breath will naturally breathe itself in. You don't have to do anything with that. And then you work with that natural breath. As your breath naturally comes in, as it's coming in, then you deepen it a little as it's coming in. And then you let it go. Yeah, and then you continue to build from that natural breath, which establishes you closer to your center of not efforting and controlling and working with the natural rhythm. Because this is really key for individuals who go far in this practice, meaning they experience the most profound states of healing, are the individuals who learn to work with this natural breath and they're not forcing it. They're not going into the session saying, I want a profound experience, so I'm going to breathe really deep. You can totally breathe really deep and have a profound experience. What I'm expressing here, and I've said in the beginning, the most profound experiences are when we surrender and a deeper wisdom comes through us. So that's just my opinion on that. So to do that, to get there, we come with that natural breath and we begin to build it, and we're working with the body, because sometimes the body doesn't want to have a big experience. Maybe it just wants to rest for that session. And the more that we have will and an ego inspiring that will, the more that we'll want to appease that will, which for many people, talking about the doers in the West, is to achieve, is to have an experience, is to make a quantum leap all the time. And a lot of the time, the body wants to rest. The body doesn't want to have that experience. So there's a surrendering of the will, the ego's will in that way, for the greater will of the heart, the greater will of the body, mind, the soul, however you want to speak to that, yeah? I hope I've transmitted that in a way that's understandable. And maybe it's not understandable until you have the experience, but making a key differentiation that if you listen to that and you have the experience later, you can tap into that. So when we work with a natural breath, we want to optimize the breath as well. This is the second additional cue, and the optimized breath is so it's interesting when you think about conditioning your system for optimization and efficiency. There's like strengthening, and most people are familiar with going to the gym and strengthening your muscles. This is something that can be done in more of like a pranayama practice. And maybe one could use their diaphragms and their accessory muscles, and they can bring in more breath, and they can hold their breath and slow their breath down. This would be very effective at making, just as a bodybuilder becomes stronger, the breath stronger in that way. Very effective practice. But this is not that practice. This is the opposite end of the spectrum in some sense. This is increasing the efficiency of the breath. Just like yoga, when you're fasted and you move so slow and so precise with your breath, not efforting, but in as best as you can, utilizing your energy in the most efficient way. So not a single bit of energy is wasted. Not trying to push your energy as hard as you can, but working for maximum efficiency. That's a whole different training than trying to work the body for maximum output, yeah? Both are very important if you want to train the system effectively. So this breath practice is all about the efficiency. So as I mentioned, there's accessory muscles, such as the levator I mean the scalenes and various different muscles in the front, such as the pec minor. These muscles can help support the breath, support the primary diaphragms, but they're typically used, and they're most particularly used under stressful conditions. This could be stress, as we've been talking about, like noxious stress, like belief systems and negative emotion, but it's also the stress, even if it's hormetic stress from exercise. When we exert the body in a very developed way, we may enlist as a recruitment pattern. Recruitment pattern means like the nervous system program that says fire these muscles to contract at this time to create a certain recruitment. We may utilize those recruitment patterns, but what happens for many individuals who have a lot of stress is they develop these recruitment patterns of utilizing the accessory muscles, so much so that they continue to use their accessory muscles in their breathing pattern, their natural breathing pattern that's going about 26,000 times per day and repeating. Now, this is not the most efficient and effective way to breathe. So that's a negative or faulty recruitment pattern in certain environments. In an exercise or exertion environment, that may be advantageous. But for your natural breath, as you move throughout the world, you want to be able to bring your body into the most energy efficient way to best utilize your energy, so you're not wasting excess energy just moving through the world. Yeah. So what an individual learns is to keep the body relaxed, which is the next principle. And by keeping the body relaxed and relaxing the exhale and teaching the body, remember how the body can forget how to relax? Not just the throat space, as we were discussing, but all kinds of musculature in the body, the accessory muscles included, as well as other muscles. They stay in a chronically toned or contracted state, and that requires energy. That requires a certain system that's continually saying contract, contract. So there's an opportunity to relax some of these deeper held tensions and recruitment patterns, and then to eventually learn to breathe with just the diaphragms of the body. Remember, coming back to that most fundamental relationship where the breath breathes itself, just through the pressure mechanisms of the body. Most people can't just let their breath go and soon arrive at a point where all those muscles relax, because the deeper tensions and the recruitment patterns in the nervous system are quite subtle. So some work often has to be done, or a prolonged period of meditation, which most people just don't have that kind of time, or the proper teachings on how to go deep in meditation, which is a whole nother topic I'm not going to get into. But we can learn to release all of that muscular tension and to breathe just with the primary diaphragms, but not just natural breathing, to breathe deep in that way. And what develops experientially is a way to bring in so much life force in such an easeful way. And especially when working with a natural breath, there's this experience of the breath breathing itself, but you're also doing it. So you are efforting to enhance the breath, but yet you're working with a natural rhythm, so it feels like a natural breath. So there's a point at which you don't know if you're breathing or if you're being breathed, and yet you're in control and you're letting go. It's one of the most beautiful feelings that can develop in these sessions, because ordinarily when you start the breath work, you're initiating the pattern. You're doing the breath work. You're going, I'm breathing in. I'm, for the most part, trying to relax. You're trying, you're doing. Or you can just let go of the breath and then you're not doing, but your breath isn't full. There's a certain point when you're breathing full and you're controlling the breath, you're doing, but the breath is breathing you. And there's not a clear line between what is you and what is the breath. What is the ego and what is this higher source of intelligence? And once again, this is where one of the more profound states, one of the most profound states of healing becomes available, is when we can drop in at this level. This is where it can repattern the breathing, repattern the mind itself at a very deep level, because your consciousness becomes so, I have to go metaphysical here, integrated with the highest and deepest parts of you, whatever adjectives and dimensionality you want to ascribe to it. I hope you get the understanding, the transmission here of there's something profound that shifts, and there's a teaching here. You could let me borrow it from the Taoist tradition, the Wu Wei, this non-doing, this effortless action. It's action, but it's effortless. And when we realize we can do this within ourselves, we start within our center, and we realize there's a way to be in the world as we were when we were first born, when the breath was breathing us. And then we got an ego and we took control, and in some sense we lost that. And perhaps that's what we're returning to, is this original breath, that same quality of being so connected to spirit, there's no differentiation. And when we learn this, and if we can effectively repattern that level of being, like our being is so integrated, the doing of the ego with the wisdom of the heart, mind, soul, spirit, all the spiritual words you can think of that connect and align in a good way, then we can live in that way. And this is the profound change that happens for many people. Like I'm not even talking about the physical healings that can happen with people, and the emotional healings and the trauma that can be released and the mind changes. I'm talking about like a deep spiritual shift that can happen for an individual at this deepest level. And then the whole life can shift, because when you make a profound shift inside, this ripples out into everything. This is like one of the most fundamental spiritual teachings, is if you want to change the world, don't do things outside of you before shifting what's inside of you and allowing the ripples to go out. It's like how a Buddhist can be off in a cave somewhere doing their spiritual work, even though they're not doing action in the world, but they're offering their vibration in a profound way, and it is shifting the collective consciousness. Yeah. So that's all I'm going to say about that. The qualities of the mind. So in general, we don't want to be in our mind like thinking, but there's these qualities that we can in some sense set an intention for and shift into, or we could even say these qualities arise from the practice. For the most part, mind is integrated into body. So we're not in the thinking process, and as best as we can, though some insights and things come, and the general pointing is for awareness and attention to be on the breath. But qualities of mind help to condition the body. For example, some of the qualities we look for is like devotion, discipline, and like equanimity or contentment, and self-study, like keen awareness, and then surrender. I talked a little bit about surrender, but it's like, it's the mecca in some sense of qualities. I'll just quickly break these down. So we got discipline and devotion. I always put those two together because it's like masculine and feminine. If you have a discipline, you're just forcing yourself into it. It's kind of more of a masculine. I'm going to do it because I said I'm going to do it. Devotion's like, I'm going to do it because I love it. It's important to me, and I want to do it in a good way. So when those two are married and we integrate that into the practice, it's like I will watch my breath with utmost devotion. I will watch this breath like I'm tending to a most precious child. And my awareness and attention to it is what helps to support its growth. That's how much I'm going to be devoted to my breath and my body sensations. And it's key, because if you've ever been around somebody, say you're in a one-on-one conversation and they're judging you, chances are you're not going to open up the same as if they're just providing unconditional love. You're the same way. Your relationship with you. If you're sitting there judging yourself, your inner world won't open. It won't flower in the same way as if you're unconditionally loving of whatever arises within you. So if you have this disciplined, steady attention for what's inside, you're not avoiding and distracting yourself. with utmost devotion, you turn within with love. This is when the practice flowers. This is a hard thing to teach, yeah? Because we can go to a workshop and I can share these things, and obviously I can talk a lot, and you don't want to be too much in your mind when you're hearing all this and trying to integrate that into a practice. You just kind of take what you can and just breathe and go with it. But these are so important because these are the things that really shift the practice in the most profound way. And they continue to allow the practice to flower for every session. So the practice never gets dull. So we have discipline and devotion, equanimity. I touched a little bit on this. Equanimity is not, it's like no preference. It's like whatever arises within me, if it's negative, if it's noxious, if it's uncomfortable, I'm just going to be with it. I'm going to be with whatever arises. If it's pleasurable, I'm not going to get attached to it. I'm not going to insist that it's pleasurable. I'm not going to crave the pleasurable thing. I'm just going to be content. Just going to surrender. So that's really key. Really key. And then keen awareness. Well, we want to be aware. We want to have our attention stabilized. We want to be studying ourselves. And we want to surrender. Surrender being so key. We want to surrender. It's similar to how I'm expressing contentment. It's like an absolute okayness and a saying yes to whatever's there, without preference, without insistence. So that's an hour. That feels quite complete for an introduction into the technique and the fundamental principles. This isn't even going into all the things that you can do with your body, because even though the body's relaxed and we're not, in some sense, being too volitional and intentional about moving into different like yogic asanas, there are different body positions and we could say maneuvers and different sounds and things that can be effective in this practice. But just getting down some of the fundamentals is really important to make the most out of it. And as I've expressed, it's so simple. Breathing in and out the mouth, breath is connected, breathe deep, let go. So simple, but this is this simple profoundness. This is the profoundness that many people overlook, the secret that's right underneath our nose, the breath. Everybody knows how important it is. Most everybody knows how important it is, more important than food and water for our fundamental survival, but more important for our spiritual evolution. Which is more important? Oh, that's a good question. Definitely spiritual evolution. Anyways, so we have this fundamental practice of breathing in a balanced way that helps to repattern the system in a profound way. 26,000 times approximately, depending on the person and the day, you're breathing in and out. You have a subconscious pattern. This subconscious pattern is the result of your life, of how you've been living, your fears, your beliefs. All these things are integrated into your pattern, and since birth you have cultivated a breathing pattern, which is your default way of giving and receiving energy, your energy exchange with the universe, with the Great Spirit. How clear of a channel you are, how spiritual you are, you could say, is represented in some sense in your breathing pattern. This is how we are intercoursing. We're having intimacy with the Great Spirit that animates life through us. It is the breath that leaves us, and the spirit within it that dictates whether we are alive or death in this incarnation. It is the breath that connects us all. So this is our most fundamental relationship, and the most fundamental things are the most profound, often the most simple, like a fish in water that doesn't know it's in water. So much water around, how do you know until you leave the water, yeah? So the breath too, so fundamental, and the more we look at the breath in a breathing practice like this, the more we see ourselves, our conditioning, our mind, our avoidance patterns, our control patterns, how good it feels to breathe, how good it feels to be naturally content, and we can establish a new center. And there's a capacity to surrender to a new level of our being, to know ourselves at the ground of being beyond mind and body, Know the fundamental animating principle of the spirit as it moves into manifestation into the physical. And when we root ourselves most deeply here, we can know things such as we are not going to die. We as a spirit, not going to die. Body dies. Body has a time to die. Just as the fundamental elements will come to release into the earth. But spirit, the infinite spirit, is much more profound than this. So this is why this is a profound technique. And once again, I didn't even touch on physical benefits and how I've seen it realign people's musculoskeletal systems in profound ways, and healing of various different conditions, from illnesses to things like Parkinson's, seeing improvement in all kinds of metrics there. There are so many healings that are possible, and the healing is quite interesting because it can be spontaneous. It's not like you can set a treatment and go 5 sessions and you're going to heal it. It's like, well, when's an individual ready to make a profound shift? There's an element of who they are and their will, and you could also say their karma, perhaps, and their life destiny in there as well. But what I'm trying to say there is, I never put like a ceiling on what is possible with this technique, and I also don't try to bias individuals because I'm not them. I don't know their path in life, and I don't know their karma. I don't know their belief systems and what they're willing to do to shift their life. So I just hold space for individuals, and in as best as I can, provide unconditional loving support to meet them where they're at and to be with them in that place. And that's it with this technique. It's really about meeting ourselves where we're at and smoothing out the ripples of why we run away from the moment, from the present moment, so we can be more present, be here, be now. And there's so much available. There's so much healing and love available in this moment. So this is one of the most profound healing techniques that I know. I practiced it for around 7 years, and I will practice it till the day I die. In some sense, I'm always practicing it because it's breath work, but I'm not always breathing in and out through my mouth in this similar pattern, but it's with me, and I share it. And if you are not connected to this medicine and want to be, please reach out. And if you just want to receive the teachings of this practice, the language of the breath is for you. The language of the breath is not a secret system that you have to learn in some sense from a teacher, though, there's a lot of sense in doing that just because of how much you can learn from an individual who's practiced something and spent a lot of time learning a language of the breath. But the language of your breath is your language. It's written in your DNA. It's written in the ethers of the energy that surrounds and supports you. So it doesn't take anything for you to begin a journey with your breath and develop a deeper connection to your soul and spirit. And if you need any support or assistance, please reach out. Thank you all for listening to this episode. It's been a little bit, and I feel really good about coming back on and making more podcasts this year. So thank you once again for listening. Namaste.